Thank you everyone for joining today's session on NestLink. So the agenda that I have laid out for today, we'll talk about QBuild, who we are and what we do. I'll briefly talk about some of our products that we have. Then we'll jump into some NestLink challenges and what we see in the industry today. And then we'll move on to how we solve them, right, with our solution NestLink. And then lastly, we'll walk through a demo and kind of wrap it up with some of the benefits of NestLink. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who we are. So QBuild is a global software development company that specializes in engineering to ERP solutions. We've been in the space for more than 20 years now. We've been an Infor partner for over 10 of those years, so had a great, strong partnership. We have over 50 CAD, PDM, PLM, and nesting integrations, and then over 500 Infor QBuild customers. All right, so here is kind of a snapshot of all the different integration partners that we've built a relationship with over the years. And we're always looking to certify more integrations and more partners. So you can see right on the CAD side, we have the major players like SolidWorks, Autodesk Inventor for the mechanical CAD systems. We have some electrical CAD systems as well, and then some PDMs and some PLM systems. So things like SolidWorks PDM Professional, Autodesk Vault, Arena or Windchill for the PLMs and so forth. Now, today's focus is on NestLink. So some of the nesting partners that we work with and the integrations that we've built, we have SigmaNest and ProNest, which are probably the two most popular nesting softwares that we run into today. There's also Landtech, right? PrimeCut, Salvagnini, Bystronic, Trumpf, and there's some more as well. So if you don't see the nesting tool that you're using today, feel free to check out our website. We have a full list there. And if it's not on there as well, like I said, we're always looking to add more integrations to our list here. So you can always reach out to me and I can confirm whether or not we can build out that integration for you. All right, so quickly on our products. On the left-hand side, it basically speaks on what I was talking about, QBuild being and living in that space between engineering to ERP solutions, right? So we build out the solutions and they kind of all stem around that area. So you can see quite a few of them. And then on the right-hand side, I put a little snapshot on kind of some of the more popular solutions that we have for Infor customers. So if you're a part of our webinar session earlier in September, then I'm sure you're quite familiar with CADLink. If you're not, CADLink is an integration between the CAD system and Visual. So it allows you to create, update, and modify bills of material and item information directly into Visual from your CAD system. If we look to the bottom right, PLM Sync, very similar concept as CADLink, but now we're talking about integrating between a PDM and a PLM system. But the same concept applies here too, right? So it's just synchronizing the PDM or the PLM bill of materials with Visual. We have NBOM beside it, which is to help with optimizing your engineering bill of material to a manufacturing bill of material. So if you need some sort of to help or some aid with restructuring your engineering BOM to a shop floor ready BOM, then that can definitely help out. And then lastly, ECX Manager in green here, probably one of the more popular solutions that we've seen in the last few years for visual customers, is an engineering change management system. So ECX Manager is web-based, and it helps with automating, document, and integrating engineering changes with Visual. So if you're looking to get away from, Word documents, Excel files, even if you're printing out your engineering changes and passing that around and having those signed off, right? If you want to move away from that and have full approval workflow, have some tasks attached to that, some due dates, good traceability and email notification all in one system, then ECX Manager would be the solution for you. So if you have any questions on any of these other solutions, feel free to reach out to your WM Synergy rep and they can definitely put us in contact, or my information will be at the end of the slide here and you can personally reach out to me and we can have further discussion on those other topics. Okay, so drilling down more into NestLink here. So, why do we build the integration, right? Why NestLink? Well, to tackle some of the challenges that we often see in companies that do metal fabrication, with a lot of cutting operations that they're trying to manage through their manufacturing process. So I'm going to be going through each of the three challenges that we often see in the industry. You'll also notice I've kind of personified some of them and put some scenario to them. And hopefully that helps and kind of resonates maybe with some of the challenges that you're having today. So the first one being is how do I create my parts and work orders and my demand inside of my nesting software? And so the scenario that we have laid out here is that, the company won a huge deal, which is great. And we have the nester now that has hundreds of different parts that he needs to create inside of his nesting software. Now, in order to do that, he's got to set up the parts with the part information. He has to add the quantity. He has to add the due dates. He's got to import the geometry, right? So there's a lot of manual effort that's required to set up these parts inside of the nesting software so that Ned can actually begin nesting these parts together and then optimizing it with his laser machine. So that's our first challenge. Now, the second challenge we see is how do I update Visual to reflect my nesting operations? And in this case here, we have Anna the analyst, and Anna's thinking about how do I update Visual to reflect these different nesting operations that are happening. She knows that Ned's nesting software, it tracks the scrap, right? It tracks how many parts per plate was cut. It has the cutting time, right? Whether that's the estimated or depending on certain nesting modules, you can actually get the actual cutting time. But overall, right, Anna wants to be able to tell Visual all of the information that's super useful. And how do I do that? And how do I update my work orders in Visual so that what's happening on the shop floor related to these cutting operation ends up inside of Visual? So that's our second challenge here. And the last one is how do I keep my inventory in sync between my nesting software and my Visual inventory? So we know that Visual is tracking when I receive new plates of material in my inventory, and then Ned's nesting software knows exactly how many offcuts there are and what plates we've consumed for those different work orders. So, trying to keep track of these two isolated systems of our sheet inventory is definitely challenging. And this is especially true if you're a company that does lot tracking of your raw materials. So it's critical in the case, right, that we have accurate view of our inventories across all of our different systems that are consuming these different plate materials. So those are the three challenges that we commonly see in the industry. If this resonates to you, then this is great, and that this is lead into our next segment here. If it doesn't, and if you're noticing some different challenges that you're experiencing, I'd love to know more about them. And at the end, you'll see my contact information, and it'd be great if we can get in touch and kind of talk about what you're seeing today and some of the struggles that you're seeing. All right, so what do we do with all of these challenges? Well, we tackle them with our solution that we call NestLink. So what is NestLink? NestLink is a bi-directional automated tool that syncs visual work orders to the shop floor nesting software in real time. So it helps the operator get to the Nest laser cutter faster and more efficiently. It eliminates data entry into the nesting software, as well as giving us the ability to gain accurate material and labor tickets in Visual. All right, so kind of jumping into the NestLink demo portion. Now, because NestLink is a background application and there isn't much of an interface to it, we'll be breaking it down basically into 4 steps. So the first one is we'll take a look at, what key information does NestLink look for inside of Visual? How does it know, what work orders it needs to create inside of our nesting software and kind of what those criteria look like? Then we'll jump into a video that will demonstrate, how NestLink creates the records inside of the nesting software. In the case here, we're using ProNest as the nesting software. So if that's what you're using today, then that's great. Then that's what you'll get to see. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. So we'll take a look at NestLink creating the records inside of the nesting software. And then as well, we'll see in the video that we'll be mimicking a Nest and creating some results and then passing those results back into Visual. So that's step 4 there. So we'll take a look at the end of once we've completed the transactions back, right? What does NestLink update inside of Visual and what does that data look like inside of our ERP? All right, so jumping into the first bit, which is what information does NestLink look for inside of Visual? So as NestLink is a background application, it's checking Visual for work orders that pass a certain set of criteria. And it looks for these work orders every X amount of minutes, right? And those minutes that you want NestLink to check inside of your ERP, right? Those can all be defined by you inside of the NestLink configuration settings. So in this case here, NestLink is looking at these work orders that have a particular structure and have certain information on that structure. And that information is the cutting operation, right? So that's the first step. Then our plate material, and then also that being a release status. So those are the very basic requirements that NestLink needs in order to say, hey, this is a work order that we need to create inside of our nesting software. Now you'll notice that I have two jobs here, right? I have job 4090 and 4089. 4090 is a very simple job, right? We can see our finished good that has a laser cut operation with our plate material that's specified. And then 4089, right? It's a bit more complicated. So it's a bit more in depth. And that's just to show that your work order structure, right? As long as it follows those criteria, it could be as complex and as long as you want it. NestLink will drill down to each of these individual levels and look for, your cutting operation and your plate material, and that is in a released status. Now, some other information that NestLink looks for, that information is within the work order header. So the base ID, the lot ID, split ID, and the want date. So that's all information that we're passing into the nesting software. The first three IDs, those are important in terms of NestLink creating the work order ID inside of the nesting software. So it's a combination of those three IDs plus the assembly sequence and the operation sequence. So that's very important, right? Because once we have a completed nest and we have our cutting results, NestLink uses that work order number in order to go back into Visual to update all that information. And that's how it knows exactly where inside of our structure it needs to update that information. All right, so completed with the first part, looking at Visual and what information NestLink is grabbing inside of our ERP. Now we're going to jump into kind of step 2 and step 3, which was what NestLink looks like, how is it creating that information inside of the nesting software, and then doing that transaction back into Visual. So I'm going to run this video here, and hopefully you can see that clearly. And this is the interface of NestLink, right? It's not meant to be a super nice interface because it is a background application, like I mentioned. So the user hit that start button there, and you can see at the bottom, it's looking for all those transactions. And once it's found those, it's telling us that it's going to wait 10 minutes before checking if there are new work orders inside of Visual that NestLink needs to create inside of the nesting software. Now the user here is going to actually hit the stop button. Now in your case, you would never need to hit the stop button. You should only be pressing the start button, and you should never have the need to go back into the NestLink interface to really press this start and stop button. But for the case of the demo, we are. Now you'll notice these 3 different work orders that NestLink has created, right? We can see the 4089 work order. We have 2 of them, and then the 4090. Now, the reason why we have 2 work orders inside of our nesting software for this one work order inside of Visual, it's because that NestLink creates a work order per laser cutting operation. So in my case, for this work order 4089, I had 2 cutting operations listed out in my work order structure. Therefore, I have 2 work orders inside of my nesting software as well. Now, scrolling to the right, we can also see that the user is showing us that some additional information that NestLink has provided us that it imported from Visual. So the material specification, we can see the MS, the thickness, right, of our plate material. We can see the quantity that's required, its due dates, and we can also see it's passing things like the next operation. So those are all great information that the nester can then utilize to actually nest different parts and different work orders together. So now that we have all that information inside of our nesting software, the step of NestLink, right, and its job is completed. Now what we're looking at is the user is creating a nest. So this would be the job of your nesting operator of having and putting different work orders together to create a nest. So you can see here, right, we've put our 3 jobs together because they have like like thicknesses and material. And then we're just going to create an auto nest. So we're going to allow the nesting software to give us the best optimization for the different parts that will be nesting on this one sheet. So it's going to create that nest for us, or that optimized nest. And then we're just going to mimic a completed nest. In our case here, it's just outputting an export file saying that the nest has been completed, and that gives us all of our information in terms of material consumption, cutting time, and so on. So once that's done, the user here, right, they're going back into NestLink and they're hitting the start button again. Like I mentioned, you don't have to do this, right? This is just for demo purposes, and we don't want to wait 10 minutes for NestLink to process the data again. And so the reason why we're pressing that start button. But in your case, right, you wouldn't be coming back into here and pressing the start and stop. You would just let NestLink do its thing in the background there. Okay, so that's the end of the video here, right? So we saw NestLink grabbing the information from Visual, creating those different work orders inside of the nesting software. We saw it provided us with part information, right? Things like the quantities, the due dates, the next operations, the material specifications, the thickness, things like that, right? It created all that information, which has made it nice and easy for the third step, which was the nester, right? The nester that we saw here was able to then make use of that information to create a nest and optimize it using their nesting software, which is all part of the ProNest module. That's not a NestLink component here, just nesting software component. And then we saw that we've outputted and mimicked the nest to provide us with information. The user has then gone back into NestLink, right, and then processed it so it can grab all of those cutting results to push back into Visual or ERP. And that's kind of the next step here. And what we're going to be looking at is what information did NestLink populate inside of Visual. So the first one is labor tickets. So you'll notice on our work order structure, NestLink has marked this as completed, right? So we initially had it as a release status, and now this is in a completed status. We also see the progress bar has been completely filled out, saying that it has been completed with all of the quantity that's been required. If we look below on the screenshots, right, we can also see quantity of goods that was produced inside of our labor tickets for our individual jobs, as well as the hours that was required. Moving on to the material transaction, this is where NestLink updates the material consumption, the raw material consumption. And the way that it does this is by doing a calculated value. So NestLink does a calculated value for the material. And what it does is it takes the true area of the part and then allocates a percentage of the scrap to that part. So bigger parts get a bigger percentage of that scrap. Meanwhile, smaller parts get a smaller allocation or percentage of the scrap allocated to that part. So that's the raw material consumption here that you can see that NestLink has passed back and that we're tracking now inside of Visual. All right, the last thing is remnants. So if you are wanting to start tracking remnants and you want NestLink to be able to handle that, then that's something that NestLink can definitely do. We create an inventory issue transaction back to that job. And the only requirement that's needed is a remnant material part number. So that's something that's required to be created. And once we have that, then NestLink can just go ahead and issue quantity to that remnant material part number. So if you're interested in tracking remnants, then we can definitely help out with that. All right, that basically wraps up with the demo portion of NestLink. What data it's looking at, what does that look like inside of NestLink, and how does that look inside of a nesting software, and then how do we pass that information back into Visual so we can track that information and what that looks like. So that was the whole demo section there. Now to kind of wrap things up, right, the benefits and the goal, right, we talked about the challenges and how NestLink helps out. Well, we saw throughout the demo that we're eliminating the nesting data silo, right, by directly having the two systems being communicate to each other and talking to each other back and forth. We also saw that we're eliminating any sort of manual data entry, right? Because NestLink is a background application that's just running in the background and doing those transactions automatically, there's no need for any sort of manual data entry anymore. And that's particularly on the part and the sheet library records inside of the nesting software, as well as our material and labor consumption transactions inside of our ERP. And then lastly, right, we have increased accuracy and tracking of our material consumption inside of Visual. So this is very important, right? And we can kind of have that peace of mind that we're getting accurate information back into our Visual ERP so that we can then leverage that information. All right, so that wraps up kind of our session for today. I know that was kind of pretty quick and nice and easy. So if there are any questions, Michelle, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have one come in from James. Why would NestLink complete the labor operation? The work hasn't physically been done yet.
Right. So what you saw in the demo is us mimicking a completed nest, right? So the goal would be that in a real life scenario, the work would actually be completed. And once that work is completed, NestLink would then grab that information and pass that back into Visual to say the work has actually been completed for the cutting operation specifically, right? So when we're talking about completing that work, we're tying that to a cutting operation. Hopefully that answers the questions there.
Great. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. If anyone has anything, please do enter it in the question panel. We'll give everyone a moment. But while we're waiting on that, we do have Giles' information up here. You can also reach out directly to your WM Synergy Customer Success Manager or customer care at wm-synergy.com. And then another question just came in. Can we turn that off and report labor our usual methods? That's from James again.
Yeah, definitely. If that's something that you don't want to do, that's not a problem. We can kind of hold off on that piece and the other functionalities that we talked about. So it's not a must and something that you have to do. That's totally up to you.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.